How to be a better storyteller. Some people come to life writing with a natural facility for storytelling. Don't despair if you aren't one of them, to a great extent. This is a facility which can be learned. It's a matter of acquiring both technical skills and the belief in yourself and in your role as storyteller. You can learn to make effective use of a variety of technical skills to write successful stories. I will mention a few here. In other sections of my memoir education, the free membership area of the memoirnetwork.com, and in other videos on this channel, you will learn more about these and other elements. The following section suggests features that make stories interesting to hear or to read. Remember, nothing you write, if you hope to be any good, will ever come out as you first hope. Be patient. You can learn to be a better storyteller. Number 1. Successful stories usually have a recognizable beginning. For instance, it was the year I was 9 that my father fell sick. And a middle that tells what happened in the story. He took to bed. My mother went to work. My grandmother came to stay. And an end that reveals how the story concludes. Finally, in the fall, he died, and slowly Mother pieced our lives back together again. 2. Successful stories have characters who are recognizably human. Don't let your loved ones come off as, quote, stick characters, unquote, in your stories. Even if you are writing about people you do not like and would prefer to show only their faults, write about some of their positive qualities or habits. Otherwise, your readers will not feel the humanity of your characters and may dismiss not only what you say about these persons, but also whatever it is you want your story to convey. 3. Successful stories have action. Action often presented as a conflict, that is, the clash of opposing or contradictory desires or an unfolding of events. This is resolved before the end. See Turning Memories into Memoirs, a handbook for writing life stories, Chapter 3, Section A. For example, afternoons after school, Janie and I would take turns sitting next to Dad's bed, reading aloud, enticing our father to drink a little tea or listen to the radio. I willed my father to be distracted from his illness and return to being the dad I used to roughhouse with in the backyard. 4. Successful stories are full of sensory details, that is, colors, shapes, textures, smells, sounds, flavors. When your stories portray a sensory world, for example, 3 sweet scented roses, rather than a vague one, for example, there were some nice flowers there, you make it easier for readers to take the leap of faith into the world of your writing. If your story has abstract and vague wording like, after a while absence from home made fidelity difficult for this man and he committed adultery, your readers will be less interested in and less swayed by what you have to say than if your narration is filled with concrete details such as, one evening, 4 months after he left his wife for work in a distant city, he went into a bar. He had worked in the sun all day building houses, and he was very tired. Somebody played a love song on the jukebox, and he began to ache with loneliness. A waitress with piercing black eyes asked him how he was doing, and he told her a story. He made it into a funny story because he didn't want her to know how lonely he really was. When he had finished, she laughed, and her laughter rang in his ears. He had not talked to a woman in this way in a long time. The details in this vignette above not only make the story more vivid, but transform this lonely man into an everyman. If you want another example, take the Greek myth of the labyrinth. It illustrates the need for material details in a story. The labyrinth was a maze of passageways, at the center of which lived the Minotaur, the half-man, half-bull creature that ate anybody who came in sight. In the story, a young man, Theseus, entered the labyrinth to slay the Minotaur. Many young men had entered the labyrinth before, only to become lost in the maze and perish. Theseus, however, connected himself to the outside world by a material detail. He used a string. In this way, he got to the center of the labyrinth. After slaying the Minotaur, he followed his string to retrace his steps out of the labyrinth, and thus re-entered the outside world. The labyrinth story provides not only entertainment, but guidance, and reassures us as life writers. As life writers, we enter a literary maze at the center of which is the truth about our lives. If we are not to get lost in the psychological and emotional labyrinth of characters and events, we and our readers must be connected to the world by sensory and material details, just as Theseus remained connected to the outside world by a string. You can also acquire the belief in your role as a storyteller that is so necessary to transmit your stories effectively. If you write your stories as honestly and as thoroughly as you can, you will come to believe in the rightness and in the importance of this work. This belief will lend your stories moral authority, and in its own way, your life story will transport the reader just as the ancient legends and epics did and still do. Here is a pertinent quote from James Joyce. I go to forge in the smithy of my soul the uncreated conscience of my race. Storytellers and modern writers are at their best when telling a story, not just because they entertain and dazzle us with their virtuosity, but because they are aware that stories play an inherent role in guiding us to live life meaningfully and reassuring us that this can be done. Being a storyteller is a calling. Even if you don't understand or accept it now, you too are responding to this calling as you undertake to tell your story. Action steps to improve your skills as a storyteller. 1. Recall a storyteller you have known or observed. What were some of his or her memorable stories? 2. Make a list of the elements that made these tales memorable. Was it plot, or character development, or setting? Was the storyteller adept at the technical details, at creating drama, at reproducing dialogue, at setting the story scene? Did the subject matter interest you? Remember, the drama of the subject is not enough by itself. We've all known people who have bored us to tears as they narrated exciting elements of a divorce, a lawsuit, or an accident, and so forth. 3. How did the storyteller see himself as a storyteller? Was he and the tale memorable because of his perception, because of the depth of insight, his conviction or compassion? Was it his moral authority, that is, sense of the importance of the story's message? What relationship did the teller have to the story? Was he an active participant or an observer? Was he sympathetic to or disengaged with his subject? Was he humorous or dramatic? How did this relationship affect the stories? 4. Of the qualities you identified above, which ones do you possess? Which ones do you think you can acquire? 5. Did you know another storyteller whose stories were less successful? What was it that was missing or present in the wrong proportions? Sometimes we can learn a lot from what doesn't work. In conclusion, whatever you do today, write a bit on your memoir.